So, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming. We were a bit afraid because this is the largest crowd what we ever had for our regular lectures here. But luckily, with the help of security forces here, we accommodated everybody who expressed the interest to be here with us today. So sorry for those who were a bit late for not having a seat. It's beyond the possibilities of this nice auditorium. I'm not surprised that we have so many people because we have great guests here today. As I told you repeatedly over the last couple of weeks, we have the most decorated Israeli soldier and general in the history of our beloved country of Israel, Ehud Barak here. A man who is a hero of Israeli military, but also very skilled politicians. We just made a selfie in the courtyard because the last time we have met together was about 9 years ago when I was a minister, not with the long hair. He was when I was a defense minister, and he was a defense minister too, without the bear. So time is changing the faces, but the characters remain the same. And once again, very glad to see you here and to listen to you. You are coming now not as a prime minister, not as a defense minister, not as a general, but as an expert to take part at the 2 days activity and panel which concentrate on the issue of the cyber warfare. Strategic currents and waves. We have a little bit discussion how to translate those currents and waves into Czech language, but you understand what this is about. Cyber warfare is the most important challenge for all of us in the West, in the Middle East, and where else to teach, where else to find the inspiration than in Israel. So that's the reason why we have organized this event, and to welcome also the other guests, so not just Ehud Barak, but also the Brigadier General Yaron Rosen, who is just exactly dealing with the subject as the former chief of Israeli Defense Forces cyber staff, and who is the architect of all cyber modern activities in Israel. So welcome again. And of course, as always, it's not just Israeli experience. There has to be the Czech contribution, because the Czechs are learning a lot from Israelis, not just in our MOD. So I'm very glad to host here also Colonel Miroslav Feix, who is the Czech guy who is working on this special subject in the Directorate of Special Forces of the Czech Armed Forces. And Tomáš Pojar, who does not need an introduction because he's the guy who brought this great Israeli community to our CEVRO college here. So my role is finished, although some of you has asked me, whether I would stay engaged with CEVRO after my elections into the European Parliament. So I said to many of you, including to our boss here, Ivan, that I will certainly stay engaged with this great community of conservatives at CEVRO institution, because we have built something what is, has really an important meaning, and I would do my best to multiply the effects of the greater cooperation between Brussels and Prague. So you will still continue to see me here, despite my engagement with the European politics. So again, thank you very much. Thank you even for your support. And now I will pass the floor to Tomáš Pojar, who will manage the rest of the evening. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much for the introduction, Sasha. So I don't need to introduce the speakers anymore, and Ehud Barak does not need any introduction at all. So without further ado, I ask you to give your thoughts. We will have thoughts of all three panelists, and then we will get into some discussion. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Alexander, for your warm words. He disappeared, but he didn't fly to Brussels. I'm really honored and glad to be here with you, here in this impressive place, even from architectural point of view. I'm always glad and proud to visit the Czech Republic. We Israelis have a special sentiment for then Czechoslovakia. I'm recently more and more often the oldest person in the room, and I can still remember vividly as a young boy in a kibbutz during the crucial moment of our War of Independence, the gliding Messerschmitts that we got from the Czechoslovakia, and the ammunition and the machine guns and weapons that helped us to stand the toughest war Israel ever had, and we will always be remain grateful to you. But we came here to talk about cyber. 35 years ago, I happened to head our intelligence community of Israel. No one mentioned the name cyber. It was a somewhat meaningless, probably originally Greek word. Even 20 years ago, I was our prime minister and defense minister at the same time. No one seriously talked about cyber. Nowadays, you cannot go anywhere on earth without facing this enthusiasm of an interest in cyber. Cannot be compared to anything else but the interest recently in cannabis. That's a new phenomenon. Cyber space is the fastest growing strategic influencer in global geopolitics. It's a new version of soft power. I would call it little soft power. The leading global players happen to be four. There is an installation outside of Washington toward Baltimore. In Maryland, there is an installation outside of Moscow. There is an installation in Shanghai, and there is an installation outside Tel Aviv. These are the leading centers of cyber, and there are two competitors which are trying very hard to close the gap in Iran and in North Korea. I think that even you here, about half a year ago, experienced the kind of, I would say, modest type of a cyber attack. I will not go as far as trying to guess where it came from, but probably some of you have their own thoughts or even knowledge about it. But I can tell you all that we ain't seen nothing yet. It's a phenomenon of the recent several years that tools of cyber tools and weapons that were the exclusive kind of or owned exclusively by one of the leading state players are appearing, trickling down to groups of hackers, to criminals, to money laundering operation and narco trafficking operations, organized crime, and even capable hackers. And because of the nature of the arena, of the domain, which I compare usually to basketball rather than football, European football. Because you know, in European football, the better the two teams are, the higher the probability you will end up with 0-0 or 1-1 or 1-2. In basketball, the better the two teams are, the higher the probability you will end up with 3-digit kind of results on both sides. Reason is that somehow, you know, football is played by the foot, it's less coordinated, so the defense is stronger. The basketball is done by hands, and you jump, it works for the attack. Cyber is more like basketball, and the reality is that the leading players that I have mentioned are far, far light years ahead of the rest of the world, and where not just the very simple tools like the DDoS, but the more kind of the APTs, as they are called, the more advanced kind of tools are trickling down. It becomes a major threat for any nation. I think that every player, every country with common sense and which can think through the brain, not through the gut feeling, should participate in this cyber transformation and enter it for several reasons. First of all, to defend national digital landscape and the critical assets of a nation, both the critical infrastructure, critical secrets, the security systems, the economy, just the volume of IP which is stolen through cyber operations is in the volume of 200, some would say $300 billion per year. One player spend, you know, many hundreds of brains and years of work on reaching certain achievement, and someone else come and grab it through directed cyber effort and freely ride on the achievements of others. But it's not just about protecting the economy and the IP kind of assets or the critical infrastructure. It's also about develop your own immunity against attack, and as a result of it, the self-confidence and the freedom to operate. A second point is to utilize the cyberspace as a way to deal with your own challenges. Law enforcing agencies in every advanced country, be it the Secret Service or the authorities who are fighting against crime, organized crime, or financial kind of criminals, should be able to use these aspects. And last but not least, the very decision to enter fully into this cyber transform and to turn yourself into a player in this arena will help every nation who does it seriously on a wide scale in developing their own capacity to deal with it independently, not to buy from others, but to develop the idiosyncratic solutions to your own challenges, and along the way develop the human resources, the manpower, which can deal with these phenomena, the finely tuned understanding of the means, the hardware and software which is used, the establishment and smoothing of the operation of the organizations that has to be coordinated on national level, and most important, to encourage innovation and cutting-edge technology being part of your own assets. A nation which enters into it seriously, within 5, sometimes 10 years, will become power on itself, and it will encourage and enrich dramatically your own assets. I think that that's enough for my opening comments. I have many friends here who, some of them on the right side of this table, understand the nuances of cyber even better than I do. And I want to invite General Yaron Rosen. He is not just the CEO of TOCA Cyber, the company that we've founded together with Kfir. I've seen him here. Alon Kantor, who I believe is not here. But also a leading pilot in our Air Force. But more important, he was the person who coordinated the whole operation of cyber under the umbrella of the Israeli defense establishment, an establishment which in Israel, for good reasons, is very wide, big umbrella. So, Yaron, please.
Great, Yaron.
His computer was attacked by cyber criminals.
It does seem like it was attacked.
Give it a hit. Give it a hit on the head. The Russian way, we call it.
Oh, this is very nice. This is classic cyber. It never works.
That's good. We don't have any internet, so it's...
Instead of embarrassing myself on the screen, I will do it by myself.
So let me ask one question to you before Yaron sets it up. How much is cyber important in the deterrence issue? How much you can deter by cyber, by building capacities, by threatening, by showing that you have the cyber capacity or not? How much useful it is in the deterrence of adversaries, be it the states or non-state actors, the terrorist organizations, or just simple hackers?
Like in any other arena of deterrence, it depends not just on the one who wants to deter, but the one who is deterred. It's about his resilience, about his readiness to respond, and about its capabilities to hit back at you. We have seen several cases of attempts to frighten or to kind of warn a kind of nation-like collectives through cyber operations. There was a case in Georgia, and there was a case in Estonia, and I don't want to count at this stage what happens here, but the signal could be quite frightening. You know, I met with some Japanese guys several days ago, and I asked them, do you have any cyber protection for your power generating plants? You know, in Japan, it's mainly nuclear reactors. And you can, I don't want to say easily, but relatively easily take control of the cooling system of a nuclear power plant from an air-conditioned room with a few small kind of computers, and try to put end to it, and it will end up with a melting down and with a disaster on a national level or probably global level. So the risk is very high. Everyone knows, everyone who is understand that it can be done. You can intensively intervene in the power grid. You can intensively intervene in running of trains, in transportation, in communication, many other areas with a significant damage. But I can tell you two observations from my experience in this arena. First of all, when you try it, the usual response or the usual impression that you got that it is less effective than you thought it will be. Namely, already our societies are so deeply intertwined. There are so many redundancies that even if you hit something, if you don't use everything you have at hand to make a devastating knockout, you might end up with much less and less permanent damage than you thought, with an apparent or tangible damage. The damage is that the other side learns very fast. You cannot be, if you operate your tools too loosely, you will have always to develop new tools, which is not simple and not cheap. And so the considerations about using, not threatening by some under the surface messages, but trying to sow fear through real operation in cyber has its backfire. You do it too often, you might end up when the real time comes to deter or to threaten issue or to cause the real damage. You won't have it because you used it too much along the way. So it's all still developing, but the development also causes or causes the gradual creation of weapons of mass destruction in this arena, which is tools that will spread and multiply like viruses in the human fighting the sophisticated viruses fighting our immune system. I think that by this time I made it long enough that you will be able to correct the computer.
Hi. Ehud told you that I'm an Air Force guy, and an Air Force guy is brought up on the idea that he is a hammer and he's looking for nails all day. So in cyberspace, going to your question, Tomáš, I think it's very different. It's more like a story. If you have a house made of glass, be very careful before you throw stones. So when people ask if the best defense in cyberspace is offense, I say the best defense in cyberspace is better defense. It does not mean that you do not do intelligence and other things which you might want to use. But really, really, you have to be very careful and very defensive. Now, I want to talk a little bit about how I see the day and age we live in, and I want to address especially the thoughts of what our governments should do from taking it from my experience. And in a way, I thought the best way to describe it is we We have reached a point that this is industry already. This is industrial age cyber, okay? And I want to try to show you what I mean and why, and what we must do. So there is a storm out there, and we all feel it. Not necessarily we call it with the same name. Some think it's not really important, some think it is, but it's there. We feel this storm, this new storm. And this thing is affecting everything, but the most interesting thing is, in a very short time, as Mr. Barak mentioned, 20 years ago, nation states would not look at cyberspace as a real threat. Today, 2 decades, okay, only 2 decades, the cyber domain is threatening in many avenues, in many ways, the very basic idea of a nation state. What's a nation state? The economy, the political system, and military or defense establishments. Through cyberspace, countries can affect all 3 pillars of nation states. So suddenly, distance and borders, physical ones, have no meaning, or less meaning. And it does start to affect, as mentioned before, in the global geopolitics. It's heavily felt. So we have to do something about this. And what does it mean? How did we reach this point? This map, I love this. I love maps. I'm a map guy. This map is not the internet. This is the 19th century telegraph system. In 1833, I think, or 1837, this Samuel Morse, invented it in the US. 29 years later, they put the underwater across the Atlantic from the US to Great Britain to communicate through Morse. This is the real first internet. Now, how does it look today? This is how it looks. This is the digital landscape. This is the landscape on which the revolution is happening. The information revolution. It's here. Now, it's quite odd that cables are doing this to us. Again, threatening all 3 pillars of nation states. It's happening through this and computers, and one more thing, the human beings that are using this landscape. That's why I think this revolution is super interesting, and it's doing amazing things which we do feel every day. And I want to give you examples just a little bit deeper, just so you understand what you're hearing and what you're seeing every day. On the left side, this is May, beginning of May. This is the New York Times. Hackers are holding Baltimore hostage. They're using ransomware on the city. Guess where this ransomware came from? NSA tools, which are being dispersed. Just anyone can use it. Not anyone, that's not true. But a smart guy can use and hold a city hostage with ransomware, with tools that are just somehow out there. The right side, the Maersk attack, is different. On the bottom, you can see how it started. Ukraine became a testbed for cyber weaponry. And Maersk and many other companies, it was not the only one to get hit, was collateral damage. It was not ransomware. This is the NotPetya attack. The first one, WannaCry, was ransomware. The second one on the right, that's not ransomware. Nobody wanted money. This was collateral damage in cyber war. They wanted to hit something in the Ukraine. It hit a lot of places around the world. This is a lot of devastation for cyber warfare globally. So whether you like it or not, you're going to get hit. And this is when I'm talking about tools that are running around like crazy, the diminishing cost of attack is quite frightening, because you can get them on the dark web, on the internet. Somehow, if you're clever enough, you can use it against your enemies. Even if you're not a very, very strong army or one of the big ones. That is also something that every country has to consider. Because it's not only a matter of fighting state actors, there are new players in this game. Non-state actors and crime, which is reaching levels and money which are, it's like GDPs of some countries in the world, of so much money going on into this. And speaking about threatening the political system, we know for sure that things are happening, whether it is hacking the French election or the US elections. This is all out. I mean, I'm not inventing anything. It's, we know what we're talking about. So we better, if we want to keep our nation safe as a nation state, we have to protect our political system from being hacked. And the next level, this is all I'm talking about up until now, was everything was now. There's no war around, right? World War III? Anyone heard about this? No. But it's going on. So it's a different type of warfare. But when real war breaks out and things escalate, you see another phenomenon which is new in this last really maybe 5 years. You see cyber warfare being used in armed conflict. You see on the right, Israel strike Hamas hacker, what Israel's strike on Hamas hackers means for cyber warfare. Cyber guys in militaries are combatants. They're part of militaries. So they may be attacked during an armed conflict. That's what it means. Okay, so this is all happening. Sorry? Okay, I will. Okay. Oh, right here. Okay.
She will see you.
I always do.
It's going to be easier for her.
Okay. Perfect.
Talk Russian, probably they will understand some of it.
So, I think I made my point. We understand that the world we live in has changed, okay? It really has changed, and hence the only real way to defend ourselves is really to think about how we defend cyberspace and our digital world in every country we live in. And I call this process a cyber transformation. Okay, a cyber transformation is different from a digital transformation. Many countries have a digital transformation minister, things like that. A cyber transformation, these days, a digital transformation cannot come without a cyber transformation. I have a feeling some people here saw Game of Thrones. So if you have a castle, okay, and you don't have the dragons, someone is going to attack you, okay? There's no use of building a castle without having some dragons and some Dothraki outside and some, you need good cyber guys to defend this. And you have to have it like you thought about air forces and militaries and tanks. It's the same. It's just harder to see. But you need it just as much. Think about it. Without that, I can tell you from my experience, law enforcement and militaries are effectively losing power. When do you realize it? After something happens. You say, oh, why didn't we think about this? We should have. It usually takes 5 to 10 years to build a tank battalion. So why should it take less time to build a cyber battalion? It takes time. It's process, it's human resources. It takes time, it's operational art. So you have to invest. And it's not only a technological challenge. Many countries, from my experience, send their digital ministers and very serious people to buy technologies. They come back, they have budgets, they come back home and say, we bought cyber capabilities. And they buy, and they end up with nothing. Because it's not only about technology, it's about operational art. You have to have this operational art. Just like in any other profession in conflict. And I ran through this book, and I'm not going to read it to you, but I can just tell you 2 things about this. This is very interesting, and it was written about very physical. It was not written for cyberspace. But I think it's exactly correct. It's very correct for cyberspace. And it was written about how the big and strong superpowers lost wars against the weak. Whether it is in Taliban, the Russia and Taliban in Afghanistan, and other, the Vietnam Wars, etc. Okay? How do we always lose to the weak? That is because it is asymmetrical warfare. And what I want to tell you is, by definition, cyber warfare is asymmetric. You cannot fight with regular forces cyber warfare. You cannot. That is something you have to look really, really deeply into. The second thing is actually very interesting and I think very encouraging, because very small countries can be very strong in cyberspace, because it's not about physical stuff, it's about a lot of thought and a lot of investment in the operational art, which I described. So actually, cyberspace, maybe just like Israel did, it went a long way forward, a long way, decades forward, because it had to, necessity, mother of all inventions, but now it's in a different place, globally. So it's encouraging for small countries. So you have to invest in all these to win this global cyber insurgency, as I call it. It's there, you have to win, and you have to fight, and you have to invest. And the most important thing is to invest in coherent division of responsibilities. And I won't leave this without explaining this in a moment, okay? Division of responsibilities is one of the hardest things in cyberspace, and I see many countries fighting over responsibilities. I want to be the strongest, you want to be the strongest, well, I need this, you need this. That's another lost decade for whoever finds himself in this position. It's a very, very interesting issue. So how do you win? Now, I'm not going to give the whole thing because I don't know how to win. I just know how to put the effort maybe in the right place. But maybe I want to try to give you some issues which I see very, very important. How do you do this cyber transformation? This looks complicated, but actually it's not very complicated. To the right, there's a center line there, okay? To the right is your country. To the left is the rest of the world. The digital landscape in every country has very, very clear divisions of missions. So you have, as you see here, you have the police. So in cyberspace, the police needs to be responsible for cyber crime. It's very simple. You need the cyber authority, and if you don't have one, you have to put up one. Why? Because this is a new era in which you need some kind of authority to take care of the government itself and to regulate and protect the private sector, especially the critical infrastructure. So you need a new body called a cyber authority. It is facing inward into your country, and it's defending, okay? Its main issue is to defend. This is the Internal Security Agency, and its role in cyberspace is very, very designated. It has to find terrorists trying to hit your country through cyberspace and political subversion. So the division of responsibilities is not so complicated. You just have to understand it, just like in the physical world. And in the middle, this big guy, on purpose, I put it as the big guy, because at the end of the day, we want our militaries to be the strongest guy in the neighborhood. These are the people that will have to be ready to fight the enemy on the other side. That's why they're in the middle. They have to face both outside and inside. Because in cyberspace, sometimes you fight inside your country because the front line is me, you, and you. The front line is here. There's no front line a long way from home. And this is the big guy. So you have to give the Ministry of Defense in some way a lot of responsibilities. And of course, there's the external intelligence agency, which uses and utilizes cyberspace for cyber intelligence. It's an amazing thing. You can risk less lives and operatives and collect a lot of intelligence through cyberspace, both for this agency and both for the military and for your national intelligence. So intelligence operations are carried out all over, from right to left. So this is the area of intelligence and cyber operations, and this is the area where you monitor and find your enemies and regulate and protect the citizens and the industry. It's not that complicated. And when you need to go into a methodology, really what you have to invest in is two things. Cyber capacity and resilience building. Get ready to be hit. You will be hit. You just have to get up quickly. That's the first thing. And on the right, you need to understand how to fight. That's operational art. And in cyber capacity and resilience, there are many things to do. As I always say, there are so many bad guys in cyberspace. There's enough for everyone. Don't worry. Enough work. So you need governance and regulation and laws and maturity and education and growth, a lot of things which have to be done in order to transform, cyber transform. And you need to grow this operational art, okay, and start fighting the enemy and learning and fighting and learning. This is a continuous process. And the other side is the strategy and concept of operation. You need partners and alliances, and you need to fight state rivals and non-state rivals in a different strategy. It's totally different if you fight a state and a non-state. And actually, to fight a state, you do not fight a state in cyberspace only. If you're fighting someone on the east of you, okay, let's just make a wild example. I don't know why I said east. Let's say you're fighting someone to the east of you. I would not fight it only through cyberspace. Okay? It's not the smart thing to do. So you have diplomacy and information warfare and military and cyber as well, and economy. Many things you can do, not only through cyberspace. But non-state rivals, you have to fight them constantly and with brute force through cyberspace. You have to fight them and go to their places and fight them and eliminate them in cyberspace all the time. Constant, because you cannot deter them. They're undeterrable. And that's it. I think really the world has changed. I think we all see it on a day-to-day basis, and governments must lead cyber transformations. It's an opportunity, a great opportunity, I think, for nations, especially small ones. And it's all about division of responsibilities and long-term capacity building. Thank you very much.
Thank you again. Thank you. Let's give floor now to the Czech perspective. The Czech Cyber Force and Cyber Command is not as large as the Israeli one, but it exists, fortunately, already, and it has also gained some experience. The floor is yours.
Is it working? Okay. I am quite regular here, and I'm on the opposite side. And I've really never seen such a crowd, so it's actually getting worse because when I first learned who will be here, I was so nervous, so maybe I will not be able to speak, but it's even getting worse, as I said. I need to first correct Sasha Vondra. Yeah, I spent 22 years in Special Forces, but I left just this December working on my new job. Actually, I think I'm almost by mistake there. I always say that, first of all, my nickname is Cyborg, which is the first part. And also, I'm born mathematician and kindly, I don't know, maybe trained killer. So now I can actually work on my hobbies. And also, a few years ago, I wrote a piece in General Staff Course about the cyber and how to structure it in the army. And I always, since then, I always say, be careful what you write. Maybe we will have to do it. So just be careful. So now I'm the commander of the Army Cyber and Information Operations Command, and we have been established just this January. So my responsibility is actually for our Army cyberspace. It's not just the infrastructure, not just the the informational system, but also the protection of the guys, digital force protection, and all these army Internet of Things. The next one is information operations in general or in cyberspace, and also cyber operation together with military intelligence, but only in military operations. So we don't do it during the peacetime. We didn't coordinate our presentations, so there are some similar points or maybe some dissimilarities. General already said that the world has changed. You know, it's also the character of the conflict. Funny is that the war wasn't declared, I don't know, 70 years. Since 45, Soviet Union actually declared war on Japan. Never after that. So we cannot be in war. There is either not to whom to declare war, or the usually puts from the international law in the position of aggressor. And also democratic states, they don't want to move to this undemocratic status of war. So for me, war is legal and objective state. Legal is, as we talked earlier, is not used very much right now. And war is also, I use Uppsala criteria, 1,000 deaths within a year. Everything else, these are the most commonly used definitions, so I like to stick with them. Every other use of the word war, for me, I would like to take it with a grain of salt, you know, just not take it too literally. There are many wars. We make wars on drugs or, I don't know, on poverty. But these are usually author's licenses, and they are used for creation of the urgency and importance of the matter. The word war really strongly resonates in our mind. The strongest word usually you can say about anything is mother. It's usually mother, love, God, and war. These are full of emotions. So the term cyber war, because there was some, in Czech it's actually used war, it's válka. So I was so glad when I see it in English, there is warfare, it's a little bit something else. So use war for our current status is kind of overkill for me. Don't get me wrong, I don't mean that the operations or activity in the cyber sense are not ongoing. They are, and we need to take them seriously. And for me, it's only one war. You know? So the adjectives only specify the methods, which is actually the warfare, but there is no pure cyber or any other for that matter. Because there is no much sense in pure cyber. You know, so it can cause damage, it can gain balance, but usually for war you need three phases. You need to destroy, occupy, and break will to resist. And cyber is good only for the destroy. You cannot occupy with the cyber, and to break the will to resist, when there is no occupation, it's really hard to do. It can postpone the problem, change the balance of gain and losses, but it cannot win the war alone. So for me, creation of the cyberspace did not actually eliminate anything else or the other domains or types of warfare. It rather expanded it further. So we have now like more tools, more ways how to actually kill each other. So future is for me, and the same in multi-domain, cross-domain, whole of government or hybrid, whatever we call it, just all the pieces, all the tools together. In practical ways, right now, spying. Just spying is really heavily used in cyberspace, espionage, and it's, I think, the most practical way how to use cyber right now. And also, in a few years, it's cyber really enabled information operations. It's getting more attention, and most of the cyber, we say cyber operations, but when you see it, it's usually information operations. And also, as you said, sir, about the support for the kinetic operations, when you just disable the, I don't know, air defense, for example, and you can actually hit it. And also, operational preparation of the battlefield. Nations are already doing that. You have to be in the systems, laying trapdoors, logic bombs, now in peacetime. So once you need it, you actually start making war. What about the Czech Republic? I was thinking, you know, something more about the Czech Republic. Are we ready for the cyber warfare? And now it's quite good. Czech Republic has a very good, strong, and robust legal framework. Building everyday resilience on the information system, on the critical infrastructure, I think it's very good in a country. Maybe not everyone is just like on the same security level. You know, some critical pieces are not the same, but generally we are heading in the right direction. What we really miss is a clear picture what is happening in cyberspace, and we don't have the ability to act accordingly when the necessity arises. Tomáš Pojar already heard it last week. I use usually example of the tank. You know, we have a tank. Imagine just a small picture. Every child does that. You know, the tracks, you know, the body, the turret. But there are no surveillance means. There is no barrel to actually shoot the enemy. So this kind of tank doesn't survive very well on the battlefield. In such a short time, you know, it will be overcome and enemy will find and penetrate the defenses. But now it's in the process, the law, which should change that, this hole in our system, and it has a potential to actually fix this problem. And the active role in the cyberspace should be given to the military intelligence. It's the beginning, but we need to start. We were talking about the 5-10 years. So it takes 5-10 years to actually build. So we need to start and we need to build the forces. And I'm so glad that the Israelis are here because we can learn so much from them, especially on practical level in this arena. And I would like to stress again, cyber threats are real and we need to prepare for the defense of this country also in the cyberspace. That's basically. Thank you.
All right, let me start a discussion and ask you questions. What is my experience once talking to the people who are running the cyber warfare issues and cooperation within the systems? First, what is in the, and here we are going to the Czech situation of discussion where the cyber defense should fit. What is in the Israeli experience the role of military intelligence and the army, and how it fits together regarding the cyber command and who plays role and what kind of role and who commands and not. How has that been shaped within the defense system as such? And the follow-up question would be how it has changed the interoperability or, let's say, cooperation with the non-defense actors, meaning civilian intelligence, police, etc. Once we are talking about the situation that everything has to be very fast, and you have to really get the assets together in order to get the real picture. Yes, how much it has really shaped the role within the defense establishment and vis-a-vis the defense establishment and the rest in necessity of cooperation, which I think it has led to it, but Israel is the best laboratory to that, at least from my perspective. It can be also the US, but it's too big to understand. Who takes floor?
I will take from the Czech perspective. For me, it's usually on the top, state level side, it's hard to copy to anybody. You know, quite a lot of times I always say, never take anything from the Brits on the top side and the Israelis, because the conditions and everything in the country is such hard to mirror in the Czech Republic that the examples cannot help. But on the operational and practical level, there's so much similarities. Soldiers, they fight the same, almost the same way. Either, doesn't matter the nations. But how it is structured on the state level, we have different laws, different constituencies. It's hard to actually, to mirror what we can use. And I really like, as an example on Israel, the cooperation between the military, civilian, and academia. You just move flawlessly between these areas, and you are all working together. And it's for me, it's unbelievable how we can do it.
This is exactly where the question led to. More on the operational level or the practical level, on the use level of how the cyberspace has changed the operation of the system.
First of all, I really agree that there's no one size fits all. There's no magic wand that if you do this A, B, C, and D, everything will work the same. Really, the local context is very different, and I really agree with that, with what you have said. But I think that if you start from the point of understanding that cyberspace in the beginning, the most strong part of it, and the part which you have to really, really develop strong, being strong is intelligence. When you start from intelligence and from the mission, the different missions you have in intelligence, crime, intelligence for criminal activities, intelligence for military operations, intelligence for internal security. These points are a good starting point in cyberspace as well. On top of that, you start building the next layer, which is operational capabilities. What do you need to do with cyberspace? How do you want to utilize it more than just having better intelligence? That's the next step. And then again, you have to go to your local context. Is it defense in cyberspace? Of course. So you need a defense champion, a cyber defense champion for that. So that's one champion you need. And after that, you want to be able to execute cyber operations, to take care of enemies if needed. Okay, you need a champion for that. It's a different champion from defense operations. Okay, so for every one of these missions, which you have to find out that you need for your own context, you need a champion. Usually I say that if you have more than one person and you ask who's responsible and two people lift their hand, you know that no one's responsible. I want one head to chop off. Excuse me for going back to Game of Thrones again, but that's how it works. You know, if there's no responsibility, there's no accountability, and you cannot develop cyberspace.
I want to add one remark. Years ago, General Rosen have done for the Israeli defense establishment exactly this job. He reviewed everyone in his private castle of cyber and tried to make sense of it and really decide or recommend for final decision who will be responsible for what and how to divide this responsibility in a way that only one person will be responsible to, or one body. So I remember I was interviewed, there was already former defense minister and a citizen, a normal citizen. But he came to interview me about it and to ask my view, and I should admit that I thought differently from him. For example, I thought that for historical reasons, some other reasons, we should take the three main roles and have two of them in the hands of intelligence. Because in Israel, I have to mention that intelligence is not just the Israeli equivalent of the NSA, to those of you who know what is NSA in America, is under the military intelligence. It's a unit, a huge unit, bigger than our Navy, probably the size of our Air Force, probably even bigger. But it's all in the hands of the military intelligence. So I thought that they should make both the collecting of information, and whenever we need offensive cyber, it should be in their hands. And the protection of the rest of it, defense, should be probably in other place, which also in Israel it's different. Unlike the situation here, for example, where the Minister of Interior is responsible for police on one hand, and in a way for the Secret Service, I understood from him today. In Israel, there is a special ministry for police. There is a Ministry of Interior. I happened to be there some 20 plus years ago. I didn't have any responsibility. I have a responsibility for lights, you know, road lighting, yeah, it's called traffic lights, but not for anything that has to do with security. But in Israel, the Secret Service belongs to the Prime Minister, the external intelligence, namely Mossad, belongs to the Prime Minister, and the police to a third one. So I thought that all the protection of vital interest zones should be in another hand. But the important thing is that General Rosen, he decided the dispute, he made decision, probably it's not optimal in my mind, but there were decisions. So that braced the energy, it created a converging operation which is a precondition for any success. You can have the best ideas if no one put an end to it and say, from now on we are working this or that way and follow on it, it doesn't work. And one last remark, which is typical not just to cyber but to other areas as well. When you meet higher level, then the higher you come, it's more often that decisions are made, and somehow after a year or two, you come there and you see that nothing really happened. And you wonder how comes. There is some lesson we all have to remember. A decision, even from the very top, does not become operational, really that someone is responsible for anything, if it does not contain 5 elements. Who is doing what, within what time frame, with what budget, which comes from where. Even if one element of these 5 is missing, in our huge bureaucracy, nothing moves and no one is responsible, because someone argues, but you did not define exactly what to do. And others say, but you didn't put the responsibility to do it on me. The third one says, we are working on it, but it will take another 5. You didn't set a time limit. Another one will tell you, yeah, everything was understood, but there was no money. Or the fifth one will tell you, yeah, there was also a general order to bring money, but no one said where it will come from. So bear it in mind. We have conferences, we have other operations, and the real frustrating issue is nothing happens. We had a rule in our in Israeli among the leaders of R&D and operations and so on, saying that whenever you start operation like cyber or R&D operation, you always to bear the thumb rule of 2 to the 3rd power. It will always take twice the time, twice the money, and you will end up with half the performance. So bear it in mind, that's a recommendation from life.
But understanding the nature of, let's put it simple, intelligence agencies, yes? There is a lot of competition and usually not that much coordinating like work as activities. And there has been competition in Israel in the past and here in Czech Republic, and there are many people, former and not so former, from different branches of Czech intelligence, and the cooperation has not been smooth. Would you agree that cyber helped more in cooperation of those agencies or not? Is it a helpful tool, or is it more divisive, or is it still the same competition?
I don't know, probably General Rosen will answer it, but my observation is that since the time I headed our intelligence community and even our defense forces, now in Israel at least there is a very deep, almost smooth cooperation. Everyone understands that it cannot achieve his own objectives without relying in good faith and a lot of trust in the unity of purpose and the others, in spite of the fact that it doesn't fall exactly in their place. Everyone cooperates. I always compare it to tennis played by pairs of players. You know, you have this line in between that says, what's my area to protect, what's yours? But one of the players comes closer to the net, the other is a little bit further. So if I'm closer and I play with him and it comes close to the net and I see that he cannot reach it, I will cross the line and bring it back, because we have a common purpose. If you take too seriously this division of responsibility, so I sit idle and let it, and when we lose the game, you couldn't come to your place. And the same will happen for me. If a ball comes very fast and crossing me, he has to do the same. So there is, even with the best definitions, there is a need for understanding of the common purpose and human relationship and achievements. In Israel, what break it is failures, big failures, and great achievements solidify this extremely impressive cooperation.
When did the change happen? Before Yaron answers. When did the change happen?
Probably when he came to lead it, but yeah, it started.
No, from your experience. Yeah. When do you think that there was the
No,
the
it
breaking?
started with failures that we cannot detail, in spite of the fact that you probably heard of some of them, and encouraged by great achievement that I cannot tell of. But the reality is of the extremely impressive cooperation over the border of we do it better and not inventing here and all the typical problems of cooperation between organizations.
I would add to that I really think that mission responsibility created a lot of coherent action. So when you understand that you are responsible to have a successful mission, and you will do whatever is necessary to carry out a mission which you are responsible for, it really brings on the table something which was before that very different. As mentioned, if you have like any factory, okay, and you have many different subdivisions in the factory, and each one of them is responsible just for his part, and they just move the part to the next person in the factory. Well, if you work that way in cyberspace, you will fail for sure. Okay, I was responsible to protect from here to here. He was responsible to protect all the way there. And in Israel, it's crucial because systems today are intertwined. And if you don't define a person, one person, which is responsible for protecting it may be many systems and many different organizations on the same system, you will fail in your mission. I will give you one example because it was publicized that Hezbollah tried to attack the siren system, which protects civilians from being hurt when missiles are shot into Israel. Now, that is a classic cyber attack. Hey, what's the better thing to do? Attack the siren system, and when the missiles come, the civilians won't have their seconds to run to their shelter, and they will be hit. Classic cyber. It will even have a kinetic effect. So who should be responsible for protecting this IT process? It's an IT process. There's the Air Force in this because there are radars, right? And there are siren systems. That's not the Air Force. Siren systems in cities, that's Home Front Command. That's a different command. So who should be responsible for that? You need one person, I told you. If you have more than one, no one's responsible. So that's what you do. You define one person in the Cyber Defense Command who is responsible for all the process, the full process. And he builds a team. It creates cooperation between teams who never thought to cooperate. And he builds a team of different organizations. They fight for this freedom of alert to civilians every day. And they know the connections between the systems much better today because they have a cross-mission team. That's how we call it. A cross-mission team protects the whole process. That's how you do cyber defense.
Who is in charge of that team then? Is it changing by the
Cyber Defense Command? Because
even above, so it's the Cyber Defense Command is above the civilian.
It's always the question. Let's say the guy responsible for the siren system needs to tell the Air Force to shut down the radar, right? That's always the extreme question. Well, you know, life is full of these questions. Nothing is simple. When he will have this extreme question, he will probably talk to the chief, the Air Force chief, and the Air Force chief will understand his dilemma, and they will make the decision together. Actually, from my experience, once we had these cross-mission teams in place, and we have no more than 10 protecting critical processes, operational processes, which we designated that must work in any case, must work. Once we have them in place, people start working together, you won't believe how little and few problems they have because they talk every day. Not every day, but once a week, once in 2 weeks, they practice, it's very different.
Can you imagine something like that in Czech Republic?
I was afraid of the question. Good is, I mean, I've never worked with other agencies short of the military intelligence, so I cannot say anything about the cooperation.
Or at least inside the military establishment.
Okay.
Can you imagine that?
Yeah. That was continuing my question. So I can say the cooperation for me, cooperation with the military intelligence on the cyber issues is just great. I cannot really, I don't have anything. And also, anything to add that, you know, some problems or anything. But I would like to say to this, the worst thing is when you have like nothing to do, there is peacetime and everything is guarding his seats and processes, all this stuff. But once you are on the mission, somehow something, you know, always goes. And people understand that now it's really important. So I would say that, you know, somebody making really big fuss about it, no, it's undecided, who will be leading what, it's like, okay, in the real time, don't worry, somebody will decide and we will actually do it. It's better to have it prepared in the peacetime, you know, think about it first, but in reality, it will just happen because people at that time will really understand. Exactly as they said, you know, switch off the radar or not. You can never touch where is the, you know, exactly the point where you should already switch off the radar. But in this, in the real situation, you will know it. So that's my point. All right, so we are getting close to the end of this 1.5 hours. We got something in the beginning by the crowd entering the room. What is your prediction of if you look back 10 years from now, or you said at the time you were the chief of staff, the chief of the army, then there was no cyber, or when you were the prime minister there was no cyber. There is a lot of cyber now. And you have witnessed in Israel a lot of transformation of the warfare, also including cyber. What's your prediction that it will look like in 10 years from now? Not in 50 years, not in 100 years, in 10 years. What is the trajectory, if you look 10 years back, the trajectory for the next decade?
I think we are deep into or entering into the fourth industrial revolution. The former three ones are well known, but this one will be based on robotics, on artificial intelligence, deep learning, and the like. It will change the landscape dramatically of the operations, of the content, and it will create a lot of other problems in the labor markets, in the even political tension. It will lead to a situation unheard of where not just unskilled labor won't find what to do, but skilled labor force, people who studied 15 years or so will find themselves replaced by robots which are working 24/7. They are never nervous, they never wake up on their left side, they never quarrel with their husband or wife, the children doesn't annoy them, and they do it perfectly. And areas that never been even thought of, again, areas where computers can pass the Turing test, namely that no professional can differentiate between the performance of the human mind and the performance of the machine, will take more and more territory. We already have, my daughter once worked in a leading law firm in New York for 2 years. She was in corporate finance, but she basically corrected commas and periods and here and there some word or some letter for 2 years probably. Now a machine is doing it much better. But even medical imaging, by now the interpretation of X-ray or of CT or MRI is done by machines better than by 85% of doctors. So still, the machine is the advisor for the doctor, but when it will reach 95 or 99%, and it's not very far, the doctor will be observing the machines, but the machines will do the job. And we see it moving, the robotization, the advanced processors, the nano dimensions of the new sensors will change it dramatically. So I don't know whether it will go, it's everyone afraid of the Ludit, you know, what's the real fear in the original industrial revolution. People will find other jobs. But the fact that a major fraction of our workforce will not be needed is quite frightening. There is an Israeli thinker, some of you probably heard of him, Yuval Noah Harari, wrote Homo Deus and Homo Sapiens and so on. He raised this thought that traditionally, all along human history, even before we started to write and take a record of history, human societies were divided into the elites, which needed the masses to work for them, to pay taxes, and to fight when necessary. Now they don't, no one needs them, and in modern history to vote. So now you don't need them to work because the machines can do it better. They cannot pay taxes, you pay them because you have to hold the whole society. And hopefully they won't have to fight. So why the hell having them to vote? And it creates philosophical many issues. I believe we are entering into extremely challenging and fascinating period, but there will be many question marks and many moral, political, and social dialogue should solve it. Just to think that these machines were not here 11 or 12 years ago, and now it changed the world forever. To think that this small piece weighing 150 grams has more computing power than the whole computers which worked to produce the first atomic bomb or to launch a man to the moon 50 years ago. It's really great. I tell you just a hint about what I've seen recently. I'm watching this arena of deep learning. You see a professor originally from Toronto, a psychologist, now he's working for Google, named Jeff Hinton, stand in front of Chinese audience about this size, talking to a machine, talking to the public, but a small machine sits by him. He ends a paragraph, and the machine, within few seconds, tells the same text in Mandarin Chinese with all the music of Chinese language in his phonemes. It seems that Jeff Hinton is talking, and the crowd applauds. And to see what happens, it can be, that's something good, but it can go other direction. You recently probably have seen this panoramic picture of Shanghai, like a panorama taken from some high tower or helicopter. When you start to magnify it, to zoom in, you zoom, it never ends. You end up reading the plate of a car almost a kilometer from you, or look at a person and you see that you could identify who is he from 600 meters. And that might be used in more than one direction. So we have a lot to change, a dramatic change, but a lot to worry about how and where it can take us.
Three things which I would add. One is IoTs, Internet of Things. I think the next 10 years will be very, very dramatic in what the things around us are doing for us. Everything will be connected, and it will really change our lives in the way that this changed our life because it's connected to us. But the whole environment will be connected and interconnected and talking, and a lot of value to our lives is going to come from that. So the Internet of Things is the first thing. The second thing is models of trust, I think, which we have not discussed. But models of trust have really changed the way societies have developed, of tribes in the beginning, of how I trust you and you trust me, etc. And we have reached a point that we can really go and into mathematical trust algorithms and things like that. And what we see today in that area, and mistakenly we start thinking about Bitcoin. And everybody doesn't like it because it goes up and down, but that's not the big revolution. The big revolution actually is the blockchain technology, which is a model of trust of an autonomous network, which knows what everything which is happening, everybody knows in the same time, and it cannot be erased. Think about it. You can trust that thing, and it will be autonomous networks and autonomous decision-making and autonomous nations and ways of making decisions in other areas. So I think this mathematical trust will enter our lives and change it. And I think the third thing will be the roles of the nation state, which we just discussed. I think the way governments do business with the citizens must and will change the next decade. And governments will transform. Eventually, it will take time, but it will happen in the next decade.
It's hard to be the last one on this one. I think it will be exciting as always, and as all the generation, we will have to solve the problems as they come for us. For me, the biggest challenge will be artificial intelligence. It's always it's like it's the last invention. You actually need something smarter than you, so because nothing will be after that. And also, we were joking about it about a month ago. You know, what really can change the warfare, and because usually it's it's a competition between the whales, and there is only one whale, and this is mankind whale. But once you have an artificial intelligence, there is somebody else. If I don't discount the extraterrestrial, so that's artificial intelligence for me.
All right, thank you very much. Before I thank the three gentlemen and all of you for coming, let me thank ČIMIB, the Czech Institute for Managers in IT Security, and Aleš Pidla, the president there, who have been partners for this event. He's a great lecturer at this institute, if you don't know. Yes, let me also thank Toka, your company, which brought you into Prague for this event, but for other meetings as well. Of course, Cyberik and Gilad, who is here around, who is a good Israeli living in Prague for some years already. And last but not least, let me thank Jitka, who has now taken care of the Prague Center for Transatlantic Relations. And this has been a good immatriculation event for her, also dealing with the Israeli security, which was definitely challenging. Let me thank Miroslav Feix, let me of course thank Yaron Rosen, and let me deeply thank Ehud Barak for coming to Prague and spending some time with us here. It's not his first time in Prague, I hope it's not his last time in Prague, and thank you for coming, and thank you all for coming today. We wish to see you next time for future events related to Israel or non-related to Israel. And of course, for those of you who are not rushing home, there are some food and drinks here, so you can still stay for some time around. Thank you very much and have a great evening.